So yeah, for those of you who don't know me, I have spent the last couple of years faffing around with CVE conversion at a fairly aggregate sort of scale for OSV, converting NVD CVEs to the OSV format. And as part of that, I like to be able to eyeball large swaths of data, because sometimes when you just sort things and look at them at a zoomed out sort of level, things jump out at you. Rightly or wrongly, I find spreadsheets a convenient hammer for that job, because it's very easy to get something into a tabular format that way, for all of those sorts of reasons. And having been at Google for a very long time, up until last week, I finished Google last week, FYI. Shock horror. AppScript and JavaScript in general, AppScript is just JavaScript that works with Google Sheets. It's amazing what you can do. Terrifying sometimes as well. So, as I said, this is going to be interactive. I'm interested who wanted to come to this, like what all do you do here? So just to get everybody going, because it's Monday morning. Who's the first timer at VonCon this year? Put your hand up. Whoa, look at you all. Awesome, very cool. Welcome. Who, if anybody, operates a CNA? Yay! My favorite CNA over there. Who does some sort of vulnerability management in your organization? Yes. Yes, that's what you're here for. Who does vulnerability research? Yes. Good. How are y'all doing things today currently? Like who is doing vulnerability management by spreadsheet currently? Don't be shy. Yeah, that's what I thought. What are you here for? Be better. Better spreadsheets. You might like this. So what are we going to learn today? I'm going to walk you through everything so that you can do for yourself what we do today. The goal here is to have zero dependencies on anything that I have prepared earlier. I want you all to be able to operate independently, but you can cheat and steal stuff that I'm putting up as well if you don't want to, but I'm going to show you how to make the sausage from scratch. Or as we would say at Google, we reinvented the wheel and we vulcanized our own rubber. So there is an existing off-the-shelf solution out there, a bunch of app script that already exists called import JSON. So I'll introduce you to that if you're not already familiar with it. We will briefly talk about a bunch of the JSON REST APIs that are available for grabbing vulnerability metadata. We'll go through 4 of my favorite ones, and we will make a template that gloms everything together so that you do all of this grunge work once, and then you can leverage that template as much and as often as you want for whatever scratches your itch. And yeah, we'll glue it all together with a Google Sheet. Why would you want to be able to do this? Why not? So the reason I wanted to do this was I would get random lists of CVE IDs and I'd want to know things about them, right? Like I'd want to know which CNA made them. I'd want to know what they were, all sorts of stuff like that. So this is for your quick and dirty vulnerability management by spreadsheet, which sounds like we're all doing in different degrees. Visual inspection, anything with tabular, filtering, pivot tables, all that sort of stuff. So in order to do stuff today, if you want to play along at home with your lappy toppy, you will need a Google account of some flavor. We got a problem?
We're sharing the wrong slide.
Sharing my notes?
Yes.
Well, that's no fun. We're going to know what's going on.
Where is the Zoom control?
That's me.
Share screen 2.
Hey, that's better.
Sorry about that.
It's all good. We're all awake now. Yeah. So if you want to participate live in the audience, you'll need some sort of a Gmail account or workspace account, internet access, which I think we've got sorted. And I'll also talk you through a browser extension that I find in Chrome at least makes the JSON output look a little bit more friendly. So firstly, this browser extension, if you want to throw that on, if you don't already have it, it's available for whatever your favorite browser may or may not be. I like it because it renders the JSON in more human-friendly ways if it comes out in different formats in the browser. So you can throw that one on. Looks like that if you're in the Chrome Web Store. And we've got, as I said, we've got 90 minutes. My goal is for this to be interactive. So, you know, I will start subjecting you to my famous dad jokes if we don't get some activity, or we'll just finish early and we can go and bug the people in the vendor room. But yeah, I'm going to do some stuff. I'll talk you through what we're going to do. I can then potentially demonstrate it, and then you can do it together if you want, and then we'll do that. And you can stop me at any time. As I like to say, there are no stupid questions. It's just my poor job of explaining it or non-existent documentation or something. And yeah, we can talk through some use cases from the floor as well. Like I'm totally when I got told workshop format, I'm like, cool, this is different from a presentation. So I don't want to be here talking the whole time. And I would very much appreciate feedback on this, good, bad, or indifferent afterwards, so that if I do another workshop again, I can do it better. Okay, so firstly, there's this cool thing called import JSON. Anyone not heard of this already? Is this new to anybody? In fact, we won't have to talk too much about it then if you already know it. It was, I believe, based on my archaeology, started off by this Trevor chap, and then Brad took it over, and that's kind of where it's at today. So it will give you, if you add that into the app script for a Google Sheet, that will give you this set of functions here. I usually only play around with the import JSON one, but depending on what your use case is, you can also use the other variations of this as well. I've personally not had a need to, but I can appreciate reasons why you would need either the post one or the advanced one. Lets you do extra headers and stuff like that, which would come in handy in particular for the NVD if you wanted to feed an API key to it for a better rate limiting situation. But yeah, for my applications today, gotten away pretty successfully with just the standard import JSON one. So the catch is that Brad, for whatever reason, has sort of parked this effort. The repo is archived. It's still there. You can still grab the stuff. I would highly recommend forking it so that if it went poof in the future, you have a copy of what's there. I would also highly recommend that if anybody wants to take it over, because he's basically said when he archived it, you know, you want to take it over, talk to me. Just don't do something like npm and, you know, take it over and turn it into something hostile. That would be very uncool. Yeah, I might, now that I've got a bit more spare time, explore taking it over, but I also potentially have less of a day-to-day need for it going forward, so we'll see. But yeah, it's as is in terms of bugs, obviously, because it's frozen. So if you go, I think the issue tracker's got order of 100 plus bugs in it. I haven't looked at them to see how egregious some of them are in terms of functionality gaps, but yeah, it's got bugs. So the first thing we're going to do is, who does want to follow along at home here, just so I get a sense of where you're all going to sit here. Yeah, cool. Then we will do that. I will happily run to the lowest common denominator for participation. I can talk you through this. I can have an attempt at demonstrating this. The challenge is this is not my laptop, so I'm not logged in as me. So it's a little bit hard to demo. But hopefully for at least you down the back there that's following along, don't be shy about yelling out if any of this is confusing, please. So step one is you pull up the app script code and you essentially copy it and paste it into a brand new spreadsheet by pulling up the app script for it. So hopefully that's self-explanatory. I can do this with my eyes closed, so it doesn't take very long, but if you haven't done this on the regular, it might take a little bit longer. And then the nice thing about, do you have a question? So the question was, why would you want to do this? The why is broad. Historically, my why has been, I have a bunch of CVE IDs. I want to get live information about them from one of these online data sources. So historically, one of the things I was interested in knowing was who was the CNA for a given CVE record, or what was its status in the NVD? Was it analyzed? Was it pending analysis? That kind of a thing. That's one of my common use cases. But if you're doing this for more of a vulnerability management sort of situation, and let's say you've run a scan and you've got back a list of CVE IDs, and then you want to know some things about them for prioritization purposes or incident response purposes, some sort of incident response purpose, you might want to get the descriptions, you might want to get the CVSS scores, you might want to get the CWEs for them, that sort of thing. So it's any aspect of the metadata that's available to you about those CVs you might want to pull into a spreadsheet so that you can then sort them, group them, filter them, pivot table them, anything like that. Is that? You're welcome. Thank you for the question. How are we doing with the people that are following along at home? Are we good? We got questions? We got confusion? More coffee required? Are we cool to move on? Going once, going twice, moving on. So now, if you don't want to have to fool around,
how did you respond to the kerfluffle that was going on with NVD in the last year?
Oh, this is more of a question about the conversion work that I was doing. It was impacted by it, basically. So yeah, I can talk about that at length. I wrote some code to convert from the NVD data. It, as a last resort, relies on the reference information only. So if there's no CPE information in an NVD record, but there is a useful reference URL, it will resort to that. But yeah, there's a noticeable sort of dip in the conversion rates for data from 2024 onwards, unfortunately. And when I say we, my team that I'm no longer on, is looking at using CVE List data in addition to NVD data this year to sort of expand what is potentially convertible. But that is a whole different can of worms, which I will be touching on in my talk on Wednesday. So come along to that one and watch me ride around on my hobby horse. Yeah, so if you want to grab my template, but this comes back to I'd rather you be completely independent of me, because then the SRE in me would rather you be independent of me. You can take my template that I've created following the step on this slide and use that to create your own spreadsheet, which you could essentially then just make another template from, and you've done all the work, or not had to do all the work. And I've got a tiny URL link there as well for that one. That is an IJGS template. If the rendering the slide is a little bit ambiguous, as in import JSON Google Sheet template. And then what I've done as well, which we can sort of muck around with maybe for demonstration purposes, is I've made a little playground one as well, which to your question, ma'am, about why would you do this or what would you do with it, I can show you a worked example. So bear with me for a moment while we try and convince the demo gods to cooperate. So in theory, if I throw this over here. That did not do what I wanted it to do. All right. So this is the playground that I cooked up. I just want to fix this back up for a sec. All right, there we go. Yeah, so this is a sort of a more of a worked demo. I'll stand over here so I can see what I'm looking at. Here we go. So what I've done here is a couple of basic ones. So I picked a bunch of CVEs and I just wanted to pull the CNA for them and the description for them. And so this is coming live from the CVE List API. So does anybody have a favorite CVE? Does anybody have anything that has caused them grief in the last week? I can do a little live demonstration. What was that? What's its number? Pick a CVE, any CVE. 1974 from 2025. It was a very good year. So if we were to do this, boom. So that just pulled it live from the API. So that's why you'd want to do that. And then this is another one here where it's just talking to the NVD. So we could do the same thing here. And go CVE 2025. And then do that. Ooh, shame. Right, so you get the idea. And then this one is a bit more special. This one is pulling the CVSS score, just the base severity score from the CVE list. So again, we could see how this one performs. That I've had to put this into 2 cells because of reasons I'll talk about in a moment. Pretty cool. And then I think this one's bonkers advanced. This one attempts to pull the vendors and products out of the CVE list. CVE. So, guys, oh, can't type, Andrew. Just moving off the cell and then moving back. I'm copying the formula from the cell above down. So, sorry, and the question for anybody that didn't catch that one was, the question was, am I just moving off the cell? And I said, no, I am copying the formula down. Sorry, that one had a really big one.
Google Sheets caches the inputs going into the formula, and then it'll recompute if you change the inputs. It'll redo the app script call to get the external thing. But if it's just the same input, it's not going to redo it unnaturally. There'll be a few edge cases. But
I
yeah,
did a
he's
fill
copying
down.
and it's a new cell, so it'll recompute or reinvoke as well.
Yeah, I did a fill down. So I selected the cell above and I hit Control D, which is the same thing as grabbing the little corner doobry and pulling it down. I'm a shortcut kind of guy. And so this one, no, where's this one? So this one sounds like it's pulled the product out, but hasn't successfully, sorry, pulled the vendor out, but hasn't successfully pulled the product out. But yeah, you get the drill, hopefully. Does that excite anybody? It excited me the first time I did it. I was like, oh, I can get live data. So if we come back to my slides. Yes. Yeah. The question was, how big do you get it because of, growth and performance and stuff like that? There's a few different caveats based on which APIs you end up talking to in terms of rate limits and whatnot. I've also found that eventually you get to a point where Google Sheets kind of chokes a bit with the scale of it. That is sort of in the orders of tens of thousands of rows, depending on how many columns you've got and how many API calls you've got. The NVD API in particular is rate limited, so you can sometimes anger it by simply hammering away too hard at it. I can talk about that a little bit more in terms of how you sort of deal with the fact that you keep tripping over rate limits and stuff like that. And yeah, I wonder if... Hello.
We have a question from Discord.
Oh, hello, Discord.
Ryan asks, has anyone tried out rapidriskradar.com? The free version looks to have a lot of the G Sheet automation that for you and can be operationalized where Google Sheets can't be.
Oh, sounds like...
So have you tried Rapid Risk Radar?
I have not heard of it. That sounds like an interesting thing to explore. I shall make a note of that for my own. Yeah, sometimes I'm guilty of premature solutioning and going, well, I just want to do this because I know how to do that. And this is the hammer that I built. So there's actually a commercial app script add-on thingy for something else that talks to JSON APIs, but it costs cash money and this doesn't. So I'm like, I like free. Free's good. We all like free, right? Baling wire and duct tape, vulnerability management solutions. So this is just a bit of an overview of some of those APIs I talked about before. The CVE List one is sort of, if you want to go straight to the horse's mouth and get from there. I'm not aware of that one having any rate limits. Someone from MITRE might yell at me and say, you bastard, you've gone and DOSed me with spreadsheets. But yeah, I'm not aware of this one having a rate limit. The NVD, both your mileage may vary in terms of what's in there these days, and it does have a rate limit. I have never bothered to make import JSON use an API key, but as part of putting this together, I looked at how that would work, and it looks like, and the way that you use their API key with their API is you have to add a HTTP header with the API key in there. From the looks of it, using the import JSON advanced function, it will support doing that. I ran out of time to actually prove that, so that is still a theoretical exercise for a reader. But I'll come back and talk about how you deal with running into the NVD's rate limit anyway. OSV.dev does not have a rate limit. It's going to have whatever's available in OSV.dev, which will be a subset of CVEs. So if it's CVEs in particular that you're after, then your mileage will vary there. And the lovely GitHub advisory database has an API as well. And it does have various rate limits on it. Madison, do you remember how one authenticates to that one? I'm guessing there's a key. Yeah, I don't remember either. Like I've actually not. Give it to Winsner.
So you've wandered down the import JSON path. There's a library. If you wander into like APIs that need more keys and OAuth and stuff like that, Eric Colita, formerly of Google, has a great library for doing OAuth connections from AppScript into any other API you want. And so maybe that's a path you could look at as well.
Yeah, okay. I won't try and repeat that one because it went on the microphone, so it's all good. Yeah, so these are a bunch of different JSON APIs that you can feed a vulnerability ID to and get back structured metadata of some sort, and then you can then sort of poke at that with import JSON. So the other thing that I like to do, because basically all I do all day is look at the JSON metadata for vulnerability records, is in Chrome, and I'm sure you can do this in Firefox as well if you're a Firefox person, is you can define custom search engines. So I've got my browser set up so that you can just type in the vulnerability ecosystem of interest and a space and then the CVE ID or the whatever the vulnerability record ID is, and then it will pop out the JSON for you. And I kind of jumped ahead to the fun because why not? As I said, this may not be the right hammer for the job, but it's a fun one. So the one that I just showed you live before was just getting CVE metadata. So this is the function that you shove in the cell, assuming that you've got your CVE ID of interest in A2 in this case, and you give it the paths to the fields that you're interested in. And I always use the no headers one because otherwise it puts an extra header in there, which kind of mucks up the whole idea of having one row per vulnerability. And as you may have remembered in the live demo that I showed you, it fills as many cells as you've asked it to. So in this first demo, even though I only had a formula in that cell, it also flowed into that one. So that's something to bear in mind. Google Sheets gets a little bit cranky if you're trying to overwrite things in other cells or rows. And I'll talk about arrays in a moment. But if you end up in a situation where you've got a column with CVE IDs and therefore you want one row per record, and you ask it for something that is an array, and it's going to then, if it would clobber the row below, it won't. It will say, I'm not going to do that because I would overflow into the row below and no banana for you. So that's something to bear in mind. And that's where it gets a little bit tricky. So if you ask for too much, you'll get into a situation where it doesn't give you what you would like. I played around with named ranges for this as well, just so that you don't have to. So in this example here, where I've hard coded the URL in there, what I did for this playground demo is I've put a bunch of constants in here with the base URLs, and then I've created named ranges for those cells. So then if you look at the implementation of one of these functions, it's a little bit more readable, because rather than having the URL in there, I've just got the name CVE in there. And so it just makes the formula a little bit shorter and more concise and a little bit more self-explanatory. Made the Zoom thing up here on top of here. I think I'll get by. Coming back to my slides. Name ranges, what else? So This will, under certain circumstances, recalculate everything, which means it will go off and do another API call, which may not be what you need or want. Once you've got the data once, you don't need to know that. Sometimes you do. Like obviously for something like the NVD status, you do want that to refresh from time to time. But other times you just want to do a one and done and then keep it. So knowing when it's going to do a recalculation and when it won't is helpful for just sort of managing both how long your spreadsheet's busy thinking and how much API quota you're potentially consuming. The hot tip is to basically copy and then paste the value back. So if you copy the rows there that had the formula on it, and then when you paste, you can say paste value only, and then you've overwritten the formula with the value that the formula returned, and then it's static at that point. So that's a efficiency consideration. I see a question coming. Yes, sir.
So that's the case. Like if you wanted to do a daily sheet, you could, rather than actually copying all the formulas, you just copy all the values out.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. And that's handy if you want a snapshot and you want to share that snapshot around internally and you don't want everybody that opens it to potentially recalculate the spreadsheet. So yeah, and if you want to trigger a recalculation, what I find is usually the easiest way is to delete the values and then just Control-Z to undo the deletion, and then that triggers a recalculation. So and this sort of feeds into when you want it to do a recalculation because you've hit, say, the NVD's rate limit. What I do is, like, when you get an error, I think it either returns the hash NA or hash error or something like that. You can filter on that value. So you can filter all of the values that are just erroneous, do that little delete Control-Z trick, and it will just recalculate those rows. And so you can kind of do that as, it's a bit clunky. You can do that as many times as you need to until it's fetched all of the rows that it needed to fetch. So that's how I would, obviously, if you've got a lot, let's say you've got tens of thousands and then you're doing that repeatedly, it gets a little bit old, but I've got a high pain threshold for some of these things because it's easier than, dealing with the alternatives. So, but yeah, at that point, copying and pasting the values back so that they stay static is usually the way to go. The other thing with error checking is coming back to this example here where I've asked it for assign a short name and descriptions. So you've got a comma separated string of paths. That whole thing has to work or it's considered not to have worked. So sometimes you end up in a situation, as for some of these more advanced examples in this demo spreadsheet, where you end up having to have maybe 2 or 3 import JSON calls per input CVE record because you're wanting to get your description and then you're wanting to get the product and vendor information and doing a transform on that. And so because you can't do all of that in one action, you end up with multiple import JSON calls, which unfortunately means you might be looking at 2 or 3 or more separate API calls per input CVE, but it really depends on what you want to get out of it, right? Hello.
Thank you. I'm not sure if Google Sheets does this like recalculation every couple hours, days, or whatever. Basically, the reason I'm asking is one of the use cases I'm thinking of is have a set of vulnerabilities I'm interested in and have Google Sheets or whatever check for things like is it actually is it actively exploited right now or not, changes to the CVE, and kind of notifying me in some way, hey, the CVE that you have here, it's now being actively exploited.
So basically, can you have it do some sort of a scheduled refresh, and can you roll your own SEM in a Google Sheet? And you could add your own code under the hood in AppScript to do that. Like if you want to code it up, you could. I don't think a particularly turnkey out of the box situation here. There is some sort of a refresh rate baked into Google Sheets. I've just forgotten what the documentation says, but if you Google the docs. It'll tell you what the background sort of refresh cycle is. But yeah, to the notification point, you can do notifications from AppScript. So theoretically, yes, you could build some. Yeah, I hear. Yeah, so ideally you'd want to avoid manually eyeballing the thing, and you want it to notify you rather than it being like a daily workflow. And I've not needed to do that, so I've not done that. But knowing what I know about AppScript, that seems eminently doable. You can have essentially a cron schedule for any function in AppScript for any application of AppScript. So yeah, like you could do that. That'd be kind of cool. Let me know if you do it. What else is on there? Yeah, so like I said, the whole function has to work. So if you looked at this, you'll notice that some of these ones here did not work. Now, this comes back to the thing that annoys me about the state of the CVE list. This formula, if I can make it fit on the this formula was pretty, yeah, pretty funky. Hey, one of my pet peeves about the sort of state of the CVE list in terms of how homogeneous it is CVSS score could be CVSS v3, it could be CVSS v3.1, and the field that you are interested in differs depending on that. So, you know, that becomes something that you need to then cater for, if not be aware of. So this function here in its monstrosity is an attempt to, as efficiently as I possibly could in a short amount of time, figure out a way to try both, right? So it tries the v3.1 field. If that fails, it falls back to 3.0. I think when I eyeballed these records yesterday, they have no CVSS score on them at all. So there's an opportunity to sort of expand that function a little bit more to handle the situation where it's not there at all, and then not display an error. But that's something that you have to consider as well, is that sometimes the value you're interested in is simply not there, and so handling that gracefully if you care. I mean, it depends on what, you know, if you just want something quick and dirty, still the errors, right? But if you want something like the gentleman here might want to make a SEM in a spreadsheet, then you might want to handle the errors a little bit better. What else? So yeah, yes.
You said, if you go back to the other slide, you have the whole function call has to work. So are you unable to break that up into separate function calls?
No, you can, but you have to, sorry, the question was, the whole function call has to work. Are you not able to break it up? Yes, that is exactly what you have to do, at the cost of multiple API calls per record, right? So those more advanced examples, because I've got a function call to do what is described here, and then I have to do another function call to get the other fields plus handle errors, or I get to a more advanced one where I'm collapsing vendor and product information into a single cell. you can't do both. You can't say, give me a singleton value and give me this array. And while you're at it, collapse that array, right? Because you're just asking too much, right? So that's the trade-off, is that obviously every time you make an API call, it could fail. And so you might get a partial row back because as some of those did, I got the description, but not the severity score, for example, because that was two separate API calls. So it comes down to how many records are you dealing with? How many API calls are you making? At what point does something get cranky with you? So named ranges I talked about. So yeah, so this is a sort of a more, as I touched on, this is the one where will the real CVSS field please stand up? So yeah, this attempts to try both. And then when we get CVSS4, we got to just sort of cater that. Yeah. Now, arrays are where we get into this fun, as I sort of touched on. So I talked about you can't clobber, well, you can try and it won't let you. You can't clobber rows below the row with the function in it. So if you were to try and just straight out ask for the affected array, if that had, let's say, 4 entries in it, and you expected that to get popped out, and then you had another row below that, it would say no. It says what it says on this slide here. It says, nope, we can't do that because I'm going to save you from yourself. And you're like, dang. So then you have to start getting your this is where you get your little spreadsheet engineer's hat out, and you start doing things like, well, rather than going for rows down, let's go for rows sideways, columns. They're called columns when they go sideways. So transpose is really cool for that. So, like if you've got plenty of columns available to you, you can just say, rearrange it sideways, please, and go that way. And then you're all kind of good. You can do, you can use index to sort of just pull particular cells out of that sort of hypothetical table that got returned by the function call. So yeah, and so this is the example from that's on there where it really sort of tries to cater for the situation where you get a variable size matrix back from your call, and it gloms everything into a single cell for you, and then you could potentially filter on that. So yeah, I've run out of yeah, so that was, we can play with that for as much as we want. Does anybody, I'm really interested, like, does this get the juices flowing? Does anybody have any cool ideas on things that you could use this particular hammer for in your day job? I'd really love to. Yo.
So a few weeks ago, I found the same thing, import JSON. So I've been trying to use their example with where they put it in the A1 cell, where you could import JSONs and just do it every day, so a refresh. So do you have ideas of things that you can use, that you've used in your environment for like a daily refresh? You're making a poor man's feed or something like that, right?
Yeah, so the question is about, that refresh, that daily feed sort of thing. I've not needed to for my use case. So I'm not sort of doing vulnerability management by spreadsheet. I've been iterating on the accuracy and success rates of conversions. So I've that's not been a use case that I've needed. As I was saying to the other gentleman that was here before, it feels very doable to be able to schedule something to like AppScript lets you do that already, right? Like it's got the option to go in there and say schedule an interval for a particular function. Yeah. Well, where are you getting the data from in the first place? Are you saying like?
Yeah. For example, I created one, the Kev database on a certain, JSON of specific vulnerabilities I'm looking for.
Right.
I put that in A1. So every time I pull up the spreadsheet, it automatically updates the information for that date.
And so you've got a fixed set of CVEs and you want to know if they hit the kev. Is that what you want to know?
Or in Kev, it exports things on a daily basis,
Mhm.
things that are, newly exploited, for example.
Mm.
And, or.
Does the kev have an API? I haven't looked at
It does.
It does?
CISA.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think to look at that one for this presentation. I'm sorry. Yeah, like assuming it's got a REST API as well, where you can feed it a CVE ID and then get back something that you could then drill into for a yes or no sort of answer. If you had a set of CVE IDs of interest, then you could simply schedule a refresh of that and then potentially have a trigger based off that to say if it grew, you have a filter and say if that filter started getting bigger in terms of how many yes values it had or something like that, notify me. That would be quite doable, but not out of the box, right? You'd have to do a bit of extra. I don't think you could do that with just functions. You'd probably have to write some app script code on top of that as well. But the app script documentation is quite comprehensive for, if you are comfortable with JavaScript and if you're comfortable with the API documentation for Sheets, then that's doable.
So I didn't see anywhere, you didn't put the date report, you didn't put any date in there of when it was reported, like some of these could be vulnerable, there, obviously the year comes up, but
yeah,
in terms of, putting the date in, so you maybe get a clue as to compute a temporal score or something like that.
Yep, that's a fair question. You can, that's a field. It's a field, so you can grab that as well. Like I have historically not personally needed that information, so I didn't think to include it, but that's a fair comment, fair question. And yeah, there are various dates. I mean, what might be a useful thing to do? Like I appreciate that I spend a lot of time staring at the JSON of CVE records, but you may not, and I don't blame you. So if we were to see, this is not my computer, so I don't know what's going to happen if I were to try and install Chrome extensions at random, but yeah, they've let me loose on somebody's computer, so let's see what happens. What could possibly go wrong? Let's go back here. Grab this Chrome extension of this guy. More. Excellent. All your Chrome browsers belong to me. So if we were to then, and you can make hyperlinks in a spreadsheet as well, so you can actually add the hyperlink to one of these so that you can just click out to it. Definitely done that before. Where's my spreadsheet gone? It's in this tab, isn't it? So if we were to look at, what was the one that Michael kindly gave us, this guy. So if we grab, so if we went, see. That should skip that. Spreadsheet engineering for fun and profit. So there we go. Let me make that a little bit bigger. How's that for everybody in the back room, back row? That good? So this is why I like this extension, because you can say make it look nice, make it look so nice, or make it look like garbage. And as you can imagine, I like that one. So your question about dates, for example, there's all your dates, right? And you can pull that in. I've not tried to make that then format as a date that is dateable in the spreadsheet, but that would be totally doable, right? You might have to write a custom app script function to massage it into your date format of choice, but yeah, totally doable. Yeah, so this is the CVE List API output. If we were to do the same thing with the NVD output, which for this particular one would be a little bit, oops. That's what the NVD API spits out, particularly in the state where it is, awaiting analysis. But yeah, you only get the same sort of stuff. And so, yeah, like which API would you use is going to probably depend on what you're trying to achieve, right? Like I historically have always used the NVD API because the work that I was doing was against the NVD's data. So that would be what I would use, caveated with it's got its rate limits and whatnot. So what you get back from it might vary a little bit. But yeah, pick your API based on what you want to get out of it and go from there. Yeah, we're now in the unworkshop phase. So very interested in other use cases. I'm definitely hearing I just want to schedule it and have it alert me, which one of the thoughts I had was if I were to hypothetically put my hand up to take over maintenance of this thing, was sort of tweak it to this use case, right? Like this is a general purpose set of app script code for talking to any JSON REST API, adding some extra stuff to be able to handle vulnerability specific data, and maybe convert CVSS scores into something useful, or any of the other sort of vulnerability specific metadata would potentially be useful to make it more utilitarian for this use case. Because I can appreciate that if everybody goes away from this going, oh yeah, cool, you might all reinvent the wheel in various different ways, and it'd be nicer to not do that from an efficiency standpoint. So, but yeah, I don't know, maybe we could create a community of vulnerability metadata spreadsheet engineers and share tips and tricks or something. Could definitely see that happening. I love a good community. Hello, sir. Probes, gentleman down the back there. You can, no, I can repeat it. But we have a microphone.
Is this able to be used in a similar fashion with Office 365, like Microsoft's flavor of the sheets?
Excellent question. I should have looked that up beforehand because I totally predicted that question coming. I don't know, because I've worked for Google for almost 20 years, and I've been living and breathing Google Workspace and every name that it had before that. I have not had the need personally to try and do that. It would not use any of the code that I have talked through here today, because that is all geared towards app script and Google Sheets. So I do not know, to be honest. And I apologize for not having back, I predicted that question and then didn't get around to having a prepared answer for it. So,
no worries. That makes
yeah,
sense too.
I could imagine the Google query that I would do to try and answer that question, which would be something on the lines of, JSON REST API, Excel. Does anybody know, does Excel, does VB script back in the day, right? Like last time I touched Excel in anger, at least it supported things like VB script and whatnot, but I don't know how it works in 2025, unfortunately, because I not needed to. So
No worries. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's still VB, of course it is. We can certainly end early if
Any other questions in the room or on Discord?
anything on the Discord. I think that was it. Ooh.
Hi, so thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
I've been looking at the depths.dev API and the BigQuery data behind it.
Mhm.
And it's got the advisories table and advisories API. What's the overlap or lack of overlap between the data that you might get from pulling out from the specific APIs and what's there in depths.dev and behind it in BigQuery?
Yeah. So what's the difference between depths.dev's data in BigQuery and what you might get from these APIs? Depths.dev, I'm not super familiar with the data at a really nitty-gritty level, but I'm familiar with it at a high level because it's our sister team in Australia. They are predominantly scraping, pulling package registry version information, and then they do a little bit of marrying that up with vulnerability information as well. But it's primarily, you know, what are the known versions in a package registry ecosystem from the top of my knowledge. So there'll be a bit of a difference in terms of what you're trying to get from it. Like I would normally say go straight to the vulnerability databases. Yeah. It does, yeah. And it's pulling from OSV for the most part. So if you, one of the other things that I was going to try and do for this for this workshop, which I didn't get an opportunity to get around to, was using OSV or GitHub's query API to go from the other end and say, I have an inventory of these packages at these versions. What are they vulnerable to, right? And then you've essentially then built something like OSV scanner in a spreadsheet. So like, because it's code underneath, like you can do anything you want if you want to spend the time, right? Like it's just whether you should or not is it the right tool for the job? But yeah, like there are plenty of other API calls you could make rather than just here's my vulnerability ID, give me the metadata. You could say, well, here's my package and version, give me the vulnerabilities for it. And on a good day, you get no rows back, right? On a bad day, you get lots and you cry and you get an alert and you go into response mode.
All right. Well, everybody, I want to thank Andrew for giving us a little demonstration on how to empower our spreadsheets.